Baby Reindeer has been praised as brave and honest, but when you look closer, something feels off. Not in the acting and not in the subject matter, but in how it's framed. Because what is presented as a story about survival and abuse might actually be reinforcing the very stigma that it claims to be fighting. The way that Donnie's story is portrayed doesn't challenge the way we see male victims. It subtly suggests that they're responsible for their pain. It turns vulnerability into a spectacle, confusing trauma with performance and success. And ultimately, it might hurt the conversation around male abuse more than help. Donnie is clearly traumatized, but we don't witness his trauma. We watch him repeatedly return to it, even when he has the agency not to. He goes back to his stalker seemingly for ulterior motives. He sabotages his relationship with someone who cares. He exposes others to danger without warning them. And while these choices are meant to show complexity, they send a dangerous message that male victims are weak, passive, and responsible for inviting their abuse. This is how victim blaming evolves, especially for men, not through overt accusations, but through subtle framing. Donnie's behaviors feed onto the idea that victims are responsible for their trauma, and it contributes to victims' internalization of expectations of how they should behave. Donnie repeatedly apologizes and has a self-critical inner monologue where he tells himself, maybe I shouldn't have let it get this far. However, he still does. And the way that it's framed quietly validates the idea that men could avoid trauma if they really wanted to. It also reinforces the just world hypothesis, which is a psychological bias that people get what they deserve. Donnie's story could have been about healing, but instead it feels like an emotional endurance theater, a spectacle. It romanticizes the pain and it points the finger at the victims. The focus is on discomfort, shock value, and silent shame. There's a concept in psychology called trauma voyeurism, where stories of suffering are consumed more for their intensity and spectacle than for their genuine insight or empathy. And that's what happens here. Donnie goes around his pain in circles, and we rarely see attempts of coping or healing. Not only this, but the way that it's portrayed makes the abuser become the story. And perhaps what makes it more confusing is the way that the abuser becomes the story, and where there is too much emotional space given to the woman who is causing the harm, where the telling of the story invites people to see her loneliness, her instability, her backstory. For example, the intense stalking scenes where Donnie's emotional breakdowns are filmed in extreme close-up. The camera lingers on his pain, but rarely shows his attempts to cope or heal. Donnie's pain is displayed, but never fully held or respected. The emotional aftermath is blurred by spectacle. And that's not the same as truth. And what's perhaps most confusing is how much emotional space the show gives to the woman causing the harm. When the people around her try to protect themselves, they are painted as heartless or cold. And in the telling of the story, empathy for the abuser becomes more accessible than empathy for the victim. And for a show that claims to challenge the stigma, this feels like betrayal, especially to male survivors who are already conditioned to minimize their pain, to devalue their experiences, especially when it comes to abuse. And what's wrong here isn't the portrayal of abusers as human beings, it's the making of their complexity taking up more space than the victim's recovery. It misses the point entirely. It aligns with the concept of empathy bias, where the people listening or watching this story unravel before their eyes may unconsciously empathize more with charismatic or vulnerable perpetrators than with less visibly expressive victims. One clear example is the extended scenes of the abuser's breakdown and confession, while Donnie's attempts to seek support are cut short or dismissed. There is one moment that gets it right, but barely explores it. This moment offers clarity, which is when Donnie tells his parents what happened to him, and his father slowly and bravely opens up about his own trauma. That's the type of conversation that we need more of, especially when it comes to male abuse survivors. Because male vulnerability is often transmitted intergenerationally in silence, passed down through men who were never really allowed to speak up. They learn to cope by numbing, by performing strength, by performing authoritarianism, and disappearing emotionally so no one could hurt them again. And Baby Reindeer was a chance to start a necessary conversation, but instead of offering insight, it offered exposure. Instead of challenging the stigma, it quietly fed into it. It showed us a male victim who acted like he deserved what happened to him, a world that didn't take him seriously, and a story that didn't either. So if you ever felt like you had to perform your pain to be believed, or if you have ever carried shame for something that you didn't consciously choose, this story isn't your blueprint. It's more of a warning. And this might just be our call to stop confusing trauma with character and start asking how stories shape conversations, not just if they spark a conversation.